Hello everybody! With the new Descent of Dragons expansion just a few days away, I thought I would put out my own official card review. So let's get right into it. First, let me explain how I'm going to be rating these cards. So I'm not going to rate these cards by stars or tiers or anything like that. I'm just going to put them in several different categories. The first of which is competitive. And to me, that means the card will be in a tier 1, 2, or 3 deck fairly consistently. So that's my definition of a competitive card. And just below competitive, we have what I would call the fringe cards. These are cards that are sometimes in competitive decks, but alternate in and out of them. So still a good card, but not quite the cream of the crop of the competitive cards. So that's a fringe card. And then below the fringe cards, we have the garbage cards. These cards, you can call them pack filler, you can call them arena cards. These cards will not be in competitive decks consistently at all. So that is the definition of a garbage card. And then below the garbage cards, we have the tech cards. These are cards that are definitely only meta dependent if they'll ever see play. So there's only a few of these, but I thought they deserve their own separate category because they may be in competitive decks later down the line if we need to tech against something that's oppressive. And lastly, what I'm looking forward to the most, the meme and combo cards. So there aren't very many of them this expansion, but I'll try to highlight some and give you a few of my thoughts on some of the more special cards of the set. So let's get into it. Alrighty, Warlock from a bird's eye perspective has some very strange cards. There's handlock support, there's some dragon support, and there's even a Galakrond build, so let's look at the cards. The first card for Warlock is a 1-mana spell called Rain of Fire. The text is deal 1 damage to all characters. So essentially it's like the Whirlwind spell for Warrior, except it will damage your face and your opponent's face. At the moment, there isn't a lot of synergy for this card for Warlock, but there is one card from this set that does synergize with this quite well. I don't think this card actually makes it into a competitive deck, so I'm going to give it a garbage tier rating. But there is one interesting synergy we will talk about in a second. Next for Warlock, we have the first of the dragon cards. It's a 2-mana spell. Nether Breath. Deal 2 damage. If you're holding a dragon, deal 4 damage with lifesteal instead. This is a very powerful card, and it's actually a card that Warlock really needs right now, because the access to spell healing in Warlock is actually probably at an all-time low. Unfortunately, this card requires Dragon Synergy to get the heal value. I don't see Dragon Warlock being a particularly competitive deck going forward, so for that reason I don't think Nether Breath will see much play, and I'm going to give it a garbage tier. However, one interesting side note for this card, it's an excellent Malagos Warlock card, so hopefully we can find some combo use for it if nothing else. Next for Warlock, we have a 3-mana spell called Dark Skies, and the text is deal 1 damage to a random minion. Repeat for each card in your hand. This card compares somewhat to a former Warlock card called Spreading Madness, which essentially dealt 9 random damage to all characters. So in that case, it could hit your opponent's face, it could hit your own face. One thing you have to be aware of with Dark Skies is that it can hit your own minions. So unless you're running minions that synergize particularly well with taking 1 damage at a time, you have to play this card on an essentially empty board. So ultimately, this card seems too specific to see play, and I don't think it will. So for that reason, garbage tier, unfortunately. Alright, next up for Warlock is their first Galakrond card. It's a 3-mana 1/1 Dragon Blight Cultist. Battlecry, invoke Galakrond. Gain +1 attack for each other friendly minion. In this case, invoke Galakrond means that you summon 2 1/1 imps. It seems right now that for Warlock, the Galakrond build will probably be a wider bore, more zoo-oriented build. So this card kind of fits nicely in that style of deck, and you could potentially gain quite a bit of attack off this card. However, I don't think that the Galakrond for Warlock is particularly that powerful, and I don't think it'll ultimately be a competitive deck. So for that reason, unfortunately, this card is also garbage tier. Next up is another Galakrond card. It's a 3-mana spell called Fiendish Rites. Invoke Galakrond. Give your minions +1 attack. So at the bare minimum, this is a 3-mana summon 2/2/1 imps, which isn't terrible, but it's also not great. This Galakrond support card obviously lends itself to a zoo wide board style of build as we previously discussed. I don't believe that the best version of Zoo Warlock is going to run Galakrond in the next expansion. I think a Zoo Warlock without Galakrond will be more powerful ultimately. So for that reason, I'm going to give this card a garbage tier rating as well. Next for Warlock, we have another Galakrond card. It's a 4-mana 5/4 Veiled Worshipper. Battlecry, if you've invoked twice, draw 3 cards. This is a very nice refill option for an aggressive Zoo-style deck. The problem with Galakrond Warlock is that a Zoo-style deck ultimately wants to win the game by turn 6, 7, and 8. Because of the speed at which you want to win the game, I think it makes it very difficult to invoke twice in that amount of time, let alone play Galakrond. And that's why I think that a regular Zoo build will be superior to a Galakrond Warlock build, and therefore this card is also garbage. Next up for Warlock is a 5 mana 5/5 dragon. Crazed Netherwing. Battlecry, if you're holding a dragon, deal 3 damage to all other characters. This card has the same effect as a previous card in Hearthstone that was incredibly powerful called Abyssal Enforcer, which is a 7 mana 6/6 with the same Battlecry essentially, although it didn't have the dragon requirement, and I think that kind of seals the deal with this card. I don't think Dragon Warlock will be good enough to be played, even though this card is insane in that deck. So that begs the question, what do I think the best Warlock deck is going to be in Descent of Dragons? And honestly, I have no idea. The Warlock cards they receive this expansion are really all over the place. And unfortunately, Warlock is coming into this expansion at already a pretty weak state. Their Zoo deck currently doesn't work that well because there isn't enough healing, and their control/quest deck suffered from being a little bit too slow. So unfortunately for Warlock, I don't think they really have a competitive deck this next expansion. I think they're going to be by far the worst class, unfortunately. So, yikes. Next for Warlock, we have a 6 mana 2/2 minion, Abyssal Summoner. Battlecry, summon a demon with taunt and stats equal to your hand size. I think Handlock right now is going to be too slow of a deck for this next upcoming meta. So for that reason, Abyssal Summoner is also getting the garbage tier rating. Very unfortunate. Alright, let's talk about Galakrond a little bit more. 7 mana Galakrond the Wretched. Battlecry, summon 1 random demon. Invoke twice to upgrade. And by upgrading, you essentially increase the amount of random demons you receive on the Battlecry. And we previously discussed the hero power, which is summon 2 1/1 imps. So for the Battlecry for Galakrond, I actually looked at all of the demons in Standard right now, and more than half of them are terrible. So odds are your Battlecry for Galakrond is going to be pretty average. Of course, there's a potential to high roll and get several large demons, but you can also get several 0/1 demons, which is not exactly what you want. While the hero power and invocability of this Galakrond does impact the board by summoning 2 1/1 imps, ultimately I think Zoo Warlock is not quite strong enough to compete with the best decks that Descent of Dragons has to offer. And for that reason, Galakrond also receives the garbage tier. Alright, next we have the first legendary minion for Warlock. It's a 7 mana 4/4, Valdris Felgorge. Battlecry, increase your maximum hand size to 12. Draw 4 cards. Wow. I've actually been racking my brain to try to think of combos where having an increased hand size of 12 actually matters, and I'm struggling to think of one that actually matters in Standard. There are definitely some wild combos that you could use the hand space for, but in Standard, I really don't see that being that relevant, unfortunately. I think this card will be incredibly difficult to play in the upcoming meta. 7 mana for a 4/4 is an incredible tempo loss, and I'm not sure Warlock has the tools to combat that tempo loss and ultimately win the game afterwards. So for that reason, I'm going to give this card the combo meme potential. I don't think it'll ever go in a competitive deck. It's just too much of a tempo loss. I do look forward to when this card ultimately ruins the mobile app. So look forward to all those visual bugs, mobile users. But unfortunately, this card is garbage unless you're trying to meme. So unfortunate again for Warlock. And lastly, we have the other legendary minion for Warlock. It's an 8 mana 4/12 dragon. Zeraku the Warped. Whenever your hero takes damage, summon a 6/6 Nether Drake. This is one of the few cards for Warlock's expansion I think has potential. So essentially on 10 mana with a tap, it becomes a 4/12 dragon, a 6/6 dragon, and you draw a card. This is the card that also synergizes quite well with the first card we talked about, essentially the Whirlwind effect for Warlock that also hits face, because that would summon you an extra 6/6 dragon. I think this card specifically has the potential to make it into a control Warlock, into a Handlock, and even into a plot twist deck, because if you pull this out, say with Dollmaster Dorian, or even with Fell Lord, it's actually quite a bit of value. This is really the only card that Warlock received in Descent of Dragons that I think is on the power level of the other classes. This is the only powerful card that Warlock got, and that's really depressing. I think this card is a competitive choice for Plot Twist Warlock, Control Warlock, or Handlock, but ultimately I don't think those decks will be very strong going into the next expansion. And I also don't think Dragon Warlock is quite good enough. So, while it's competitive in those decks, it's ultimately garbage tier because Warlock as a class, it's a dumpster bin, unfortunately, right now. So let's look at all the Warlock cards one last time. The sad, sad Warlock cards. Rain of Fire is interesting to use with Zaraku the Warp, but otherwise I don't see much use for it. Nether Breath is a very strong card, but I'm not sure Dragon Warlock will be quite good enough. Dark Skies is terrible. Dragonblight Cultist lends itself to a zoo-oriented Galakrond build, but I don't think that's superior to a regular zoo build. Fiendish Rites, same idea. Veiled Worshipper, same idea. Crazed Netherwing, it's a mini Abyssal Enforcer, but it's also much harder to activate. Abyssal Summoner, good handlock card, but who's playing handlock, right? Galakrond himself, summoning random demons is way too variable, and the hero power, while it's decent summoning 2/1/1 imps, ultimately I don't think it's good enough. Valdris has a very interesting effect, and I look forward to trying to find a use for it, but competitively, it's just not there. The last card for Warlock is probably the best card, Zaraku the Warped. I think that does find its way into Control Warlock, Handlock, and Platos Warlock, but again, those decks I don't think are going to be super relevant going forward. So Warlock, sad state of affairs coming into the expansion, and after we see these cards, still in a sad, sad state. I don't think we're going to be seeing much Warlock this expansion at all. So, rip Warlock. And I guess that's the review, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Look forward to the next one.